Is really expensive equipment worth the money? Now, this is a question I got just recently over on YouTube. And to answer this, there's so many variables here of yes, expensive gear is worth the money, but it depends who it is. Look, it's worth the money to me running a business because there's a few things. There's a few things that expensive gear does. Is expensive gear isn't necessarily accessible to everybody. So if you have lots of nice expensive gear, as a service, it's far more attractive because you're going to that person to have your song put through all this equipment, and that sort of equipment isn't accessible to the majority of people in their home studios, for instance. So in that regards, expensive gear is highly worthwhile. But if you're just thinking about it from the perspective of, let's say we were to talk about the Better Maker EQ, and then consider, let's say the West Audio Tube EQ is an expensive EQ. That one's 5,200. These ones I think are just over £2,000. So you've got one that's £2,000, and many people will say, "Oh, well, that's expensive." It is expensive, but that's the West Audio Tube EQ is kind of a lot more expensive. You could get two and a half of these for the price of a West Audio EQ. But what that does do, that West Audio Tube EQ, what that does do that the Better Maker doesn't do, is it's a more unique sound. There's a better sound that there's not technically, you wouldn't say there's a better sound. It's a more unique sound. Like, you can get a sound very close to the Better Maker EQ in the box. You know, it's got that sort of sound to it. It's not like it's super clean. Whereas the Tube EQ's really lovely and has this tone in the low end that you don't get with a cheaper EQ, for instance. So in that regards, more expensive equipment has more of a unique sound to it, I guess, sometimes. But the main thing with regards to that, it gives you something that is unique that not a lot of other people have access to. You also, with expensive gear, you know, it's not necessarily a case of the expensive gear where it kind of uses more expensive parts and that's why it's expensive. That is often the case. But sometimes the case is that the more expensive gear is more boutique. So, for instance, SSL, you know, it's mass produced. It's produced out in, it's made out in China now. So it's mass produced, and they have really kind of created products that are, let's say they are quite cheap, but they're not necessarily cheap with the components as such. They're not made to the highest level, but they're made to the level that's perfectly fine. But they've done it so that they can fill a market at the lower end where everybody can kind of afford the SSL Fusion, for instance. I think they're around 1,500 here, and then you've got like the 500 series units. They're like £300, which is really good, and they are good units. They are really good gear. But when you consider, you know, if you were to look at like the Fusion compared to the Rupert Neve MBT, I prefer the MBT. But you could get 2 or 3 Fusions for the price of the MBT. So it's like, I don't know, you can weigh it up a little bit of, well, you know, the thing with it is more people are going to come to you if you're offering a service, if you've got an MBT over a Fusion. And that might not actually be true, really, because everybody in the industry kind of knows the Fusion and kind of has a good understanding of the Fusion, and people may come to you for the Fusion. But look, in terms of, to answer this question, you don't need really expensive gear. It's nice to have. You've got to ask yourself, can I justify buying that expensive gear? Because, like, I've seen people who have terrible rooms with lots of nice expensive gear, and I'm like, do your room first, get your room sorted out, and then get the gear. Because if you're mixing on a pair of HS10s or something in a rubbish room with thousands of pounds worth of gear around you, your mixes are still going to be bad because you're not really kind of hearing exactly what you want to be hearing. It's inaccurate. So get that sorted first, and then get all the gear. That sort of thing's really important. You can get away with spending £2,000 EQs, £2,000 compressors. You can spend that sort of money. You don't have to really go into the realms of £8,000 for £8,000 for the 8,800 for the Hum Audio Lull. That's it's here's the thing, is, like I said at the start, it's highly unique, sounds incredible, but is it essential? No, not really. It's not really essential. Could you go in the box and use L2? Of course you could. But someone like myself, I want to use that because that gives me that little 5%. That's all it gives me, 5%. It's 5% better than someone else who doesn't have it. And so it all comes down to whether you can justify buying the expensive gear. And some people can, some people can't. And if you're a music producer that's turning over, I don't know, 10 grand a show or something, 100 grand a show, then buy all the most expensive gear you want. You can spend your money on whatever you want. But if you're a music producer that's making 50 quid out of a release, and you're not getting any bookings, then I'd say you're mental going out and spending £8,000 on a limiter. There's better ways to be spending your money. So yeah, it depends on who you are, where you are in the industry. If you're an industry professional, if you're offering services, by all means, get the big expensive gear. It will attract clients, and I can testify to that because all the gear that's around me, every people who watch these videos, it's like, look, this is all the gear that I use. Come do some mixing and mastering with me. There is a pool with nice expensive gear. So yeah, not massively important to have expensive gear, but it's nice to have. Trust me.